Welcome, everybody. My name is Tony Morrow, and this is Star Trek Lost Stars. As you just saw there with the quick intro of the tactical sessions, we are having a tactical session today because we have some exciting news when it comes to the campaign and the new stuff. But before I get into that, let me introduce you if you're new here. This is Star Trek Lost Stars, a 4X strategy game that a bunch of players are playing, and we want you to join us along that journey. We will explore new space, expand our borders, exploit those resources, and exterminate the enemies that oppose us. This campaign is coming from the perspective of the Klingon Empire, the empire that we are playing, you, me, and the rest of us. Watching this channel, playing this game along with us as one big giant team. If you want to support us and enjoy us, then please follow along either by following on this channel, hitting a like or a thumbs up to provide us some kind of feedback that you're liking what we're doing. And if you are so inclined, then please feel free to head over to patreon.com/loststars and consider supporting us that way as well. So today we have a whole bunch of exciting things to go through. New things that have been revealed, and in case you didn't see, depending on where you're coming from, whether you're on Twitch or YouTube, if you did not see it, then let me introduce you to the full map reveal. All right, so we've got some exciting sort of role play to walk through here. I guess I should preface it all by saying, so as you know, if you followed along this channel at all, then you know that we play this game. This game is Federation and Empire, a traditional tabletop strategy war game that is played in the Starfleet universe. Starfleet universe is basically anything from the original TOS television series of Star Trek. Technically also includes the animated series, although many of you probably haven't seen the animated series. So think original Kirk, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, Spock, and so on. It exists in that world, very much akin to sort of Axanar, and so on. And this is a strategy game played sort of at a little bit more complex level than Risk, but think of it more like an Axis and Allies tabletop kind of game. We use the Federation and Empire rule set as published by the Amarillo Design Bureau, and we use a platform called Vassal to be able to replicate the map, the tabletop, in this virtual space, and we play it online. We swap turns back and forth using Excel spreadsheets and, again, Vassal to be able to show you the map. And we, on this show, on this live stream, are bringing you along for the journey as we play out one of these campaigns in sort of real time. So we exchange our role-playing through email. And so I'm going to read you some of those emails that have been exchanged just recently, and hopefully it'll provide some kind of context as to what's going on. Also, seeing as this is going to be a full map reveal, I'm going to touch on some of the factions that we're playing with, and not necessarily talk about the players, but just the factions, like the interpretation of the species, the races, the faction that they're playing, and how that might play out or factor into how we're going to sort of play the game, and what kind of strategies that we'll sort of collectively decide on when it comes to engaging and encountering these different folks. So why don't I get started with some telling of the tales when it comes to the map. So let me switch over to this map view. It's going to be kind of a big view, and you're not necessarily going to see a lot of detail here. But the point here is to show you the big picture. So on this map, you can see basically a hexagon shape, right? That's our overall playing map. You can see that in the bottom right corner, there is the blue team, which is the Federation. And in previous live streams, you have seen us talk about that, the Federation and so on. On the top left, you will notice a red team. That is the Tholian faction, and we'll get into them in just a sec. And then, of course, sort of in between the two, you can see us, which is the Klingon faction in black. Now, you can also see sort of in the bottom, or more towards the middle of the map, you'll notice this sort of little red spot there with the blue circle, or the blue wormhole iconography there. We're going to talk about that in a minute too, but let me dive into exactly what we're looking at when we're looking when we're seeing this red faction that's popped up. So I'm going to pull up the map, and let's switch over to we'll switch over to the Vassal desktop view so that you can see exactly what I'm looking at as well. So let's swatch over to that now. All right. So here you can see again we've got the Klingon faction here, and you've got the Tholian faction. So as a quick recap, I'm going to take away the ships here so you can see, and I'll take away the bases so you can see a little bit better. So this, in Papa 11, right here, you'll see that this thing popped up. Now this, just as a recap, this is a wormhole. In this game, we have wormholes and gravity wells. Wormholes are two-way doors, and gravity wells are one-way doors. Now, typically, when we discover a gravity well, it's always going to be an in the sense that we will always discover sort of like a door that we can walk through. Whether that's a two-way door or a one-way door, that totally depends. In the context of this particular game, or this particular map that you see here, this wormhole popped up. But it wasn't something that we discovered. It's something that was discovered by the Tholians over on their side of the map, and they went through it, and it popped up here. So when it popped up, we had this ship, and it was crippled when it came through. So a WPC. Basically, it's the equivalent of a very light frigate, but it's a W-era frigate. So I think it's technically a W patrol craft is what the PC stands for, so patrol craft. And it's a W-era ship, so very akin to the E1 that we had. Hence the 1.5 attack factor. Sorry, as far as the iconography here, when you see the little, when you look at the numbers, you see the 1 and the little diamond. The diamond, when it comes to the numbers, is to indicate a half. So you've got 1.5 as the attack factor, and then 3 defense. So this ship came through the wormhole, and in response, I sent the Klingon home fleet to encounter it. Now, just as a recap, I will show you the Klingon home fleet in turn 61, comprised of a D4 and 8 F4s, as well as an E2. So the E2 is here. So we sent up the fleet up to that hex, which was 3 hexes away. 1, this is the home world here. 1, 2, 3. And then the E2 escorted that ship to a base, which we have in that same hex. I'll reintroduce the bases here. So introduce it there into Papa 10. So we took it there to offer it some help. Now, let me quickly take you back here. While I pull up the email that you'll see, or that we'll go over when it comes to this sort of exchange between me and the player who's playing the Tholian faction. So for those of you who don't know the Tholians, you might remember that there was an episode in old school Star Trek called the Tholian Web. And so basically there were these wedge-shaped ships, and they basically spun a web in space that trapped the Enterprise. And there was a whole thing that happened there. You might have seen episodes of Enterprise where they depicted the Tholians as these crystalline, like crystal-type beings, and again having these diamond or wedge-shaped ships. So effectively, that's the faction of the species. Now, in the lore of Star Trek, the Tholians are an advanced species, more advanced than other factions, and they kind of have been stranded in the area of the galaxy that the Federation, the Klingon, the Romulans are. And on the traditional map, there's this sort of like point at the spot on the map where the Romulans, the Klingons, and the Federation all touch the map at the same point. And there's this little wedge or diamond shape or circle of Tholian space. And the Tholians are basically, this is this small community of wayward travelers that have somehow been far flung across the galaxy. and they've established this little foothold in this little nook of space. And that's kind of what the Tholian episode in TOS talks about a little bit. And so, long story short, they are a faction in the Starfleet universe. In the normal game, they are a little bit more potent than they are in this game, in the sense that they have a slightly more advanced technology level than the default players, so you can't steamroll them. But in this game, they're just another faction like anybody else, and we start them off at W and work their way up through W, Y, M, and GW Tech. So it's the same thing as everybody else. So I'm just looking at all the. I'm trying to find this email chain. There we go. So as soon as the ship showed up on my map, I got this email, and it was broadcast from ship in Papa 11. Mayday, Mayday, this is the Tholian Corvette 23 requesting assistance. Our transit through the gravity rift ripped one of our warp nacelles out of its moorings, and Rocky thinks the entire frame is warped. We'll never make it back in this condition. What? So they come through the wormhole, and very obviously, when it comes to the tech levels in this game, when you first transit a wormhole, you're always going to be crippled. That's the sort of the default effect of going through wormholes when you don't have any research and development in that specific technology. So they go through the wormhole, they get crippled, they come out the other side, and this is the message I receive. Now, keep in mind, when he shows up on the other side of the wormhole, he shows up in this sea of gray hexes. He doesn't have anything explored. He can't see anything. He just knows that he popped up in the middle of a gray hex. And so my response to him was, attention, Tholian Corvette, this is the Klingon cruiser Pi Ra. We are responding to your mayday. We will escort you to sector Papa 10, which is just above where they came through, where we can provide you support and repairs. IKV, Imperial Klingon vessel Pi Ra. He responds to me, good to hear a friendly voice this far from home. Thank you, Pi Ra. We'll follow your lead. Great. So they're not over. I mean, why would you try and pick a fight when you're already crippled? But good to know that they're playing along. So as this email chain continues, as the docking clamps secure the foreign ship in a repair berth, a squad of grumpy engineers gather to enter the Tholian ship and begin surveying for repairs. The airlock releases with a puff of equalization, and the Klingon base commander stands ready to welcome his far-flung guests. With a robust security detail, of course. Welcome, strangers. I am Commander Turok of the Imperial Klingon Navy. Welcome to Sector Station Pi 10. With your permission, Captain, I have a squad of my engineers ready to provide an initial survey of repairs. They can begin collaborating with your engineer to plan a repair schedule. In the meantime, I would invite you and your senior staff to a tour of our facilities. It would be my honor if you would also join me for a feast this evening in honor of your arrival. Shall we begin your repairs and look forward to receiving you this evening? And please excuse me as I throw in a little bit of a voice there, but that's what's going on. So take a little sip of coffee here. So the other player responds, a single elephantine figure is waiting at the airlock unarmed. Now that's real key, elephantine. So basically it looks like an elephant. And I will follow up this live stream with a series of videos over the course of the week that will talk about the different factions and the way that they're playing. But in short, the Tholian faction in the original game are the Tholians, and Tholians are interpreted as being these crystalline creatures. However, the Tholian Empire has subject races, and in the sort of greater invented mythology that we're using in this game, one of those subject races in a far-flung past was this species of elephantine creatures. The Tholians, the crystalline creatures of the past, are far and long gone. However, the elephantine creatures have picked up Tholian technology and are currently using it. Now, he's carrying on a sort of persona that comes along with the Tholians, which is sort of this kind of frontiersman kind of attitude and character. So if you think about it, you know, a little rough around the edges, very much duct tape and bubble gum things together, and like I say, like a rough border town or frontiersman kind of approach, less refined, less sophisticated, much more kind of down to earth kind of folks. Now, the elephantine angle here is taken from a specific series of novels, which again I'll explain in a following video. But basically, the elephantine creatures come from a science fiction series of novels, and they are called the, and I'm going to get the pronunciation here wrong, but it's called the Fithip, F-I-T-H-P. I'm totally messing that pronunciation. But nonetheless, they are a sort of an elephantine race. They have, instead of one single elephant trunk, it's sort of a trunk with at least two appendages. But they walk on all fours, and they use their trunks as their dexterous appendages to manipulate stuff. So that gives you a kind of a rough outline of what this kind of looks like. But the elephants are not like elephants that you'd find in Africa in the sense of that size. They're more sort of smaller elephants more akin and in relationship to the size of your average person. So a single elephantine figure is waiting at the airlock, unarmed. There is a somewhat annoyed security detail standing well back of him. Part of their annoyance is due to the fact that he is not armed. I am Captain Tarrant of the Tholian Fithip. Again, my pronunciation is terrible. F-I-T-H-P as a reminder. Thank you for your assistance. My crew has orders to assist your engineers however they can. My engineer Rocky is in the engine bay, with still bemoaning what I did to his poor baby. We are a small ship, so my senior staff amounts to myself, my first officer. This is in response to what I said to him. My senior staff amounts to myself, my first officer, Sarton, and Rocky. I'd prefer to leave the engineer where he's happiest with his toys, but Sarton and I would be glad of the chance to stretch our legs and thank you for the honor you are showing us. And as a sort of a side note, P.S. and very OOC out of character. Oh no, not grumpy engineers, as in what I had mentioned before. So this is just a little bit of the back and forth that goes on between us. And I'll just finish off and read the rest of the roleplay piece. The tour of the base station highlights the various training facilities for physical training and communal dining facilities. The large open spaces are accentuated by key choke points and controlled access routes. The station is designed for conflict and defense. At dinner, the captain and first officer are entertained by the base commander in the more intimate setting of the commander's observation deck. A series of 6-foot wide porthole-style windows at the perimeter provide a 360-degree vantage of the surrounding space. As the main meal comes to a close, a series of beverages are presented at the center of their triangular table. Water, a rich and highly alcoholic form of wine, blood wine, and a potent amber liquid similar to watered honey are presented on the table. Tell me, Captain, what inspired your trip through the wormhole? What can you tell me of the Tholians, your homeworld, and culture? In response, Captain Tarrant maintains a schooled expression throughout the tour, though Sarton looks around with a more animated expression. The captain asks a few questions about the training facilities. As their race uses their trunks for manipulation rather than arms like the Klingons, and the idea of repeated heavy lifting of weights seems foreign to him. The Tholians avoid the meat dishes, going to the dinner, sticking to anything that looks sufficiently vegetative, even if intended only as a garnish. The beverages seem more to their taste, and they try each with obvious signs of approval. Given their great body mass, they do not appear to become inebriated. Tarkash said the lab boys figured we had a better than even chance of making it through. We were expendable, the last of an old line, so we got sent. And hey, we made it through mostly intact. Rocky figures we need to reinforce the structural integrity field by another 50% to reliably make it through. He has some ideas, but the captain shrugs his massive shoulders. You know engineers, full of ideas. Some work. He goes on to recount some tales of the Tholian homeworld. His people began as agrarian nomads, and their history recounts a time of great burning some centuries ago. After that time, they discovered a series of carved stones which helped guide their technological progress in fits and starts. As a result, archaeology has become the most revered profession on the planet. Chief archaeologist Tarkash is not the titular leader of the Tholian Fithip, but most of them look to him for guidance even so. Especially after the discovery of, well, I probably shouldn't talk about that. Out of character, descriptive, the Tholian Fithip are not the traditional rockhead Tholians, but instead a loyal client race that inherited lost Tholian tech after the Tholians were killed off in the last Great War. They closely resemble the aliens in Niven and Perel's Footfall. Those are the science fiction novels I mentioned before. Again, I'll follow up with a video on this. They look like small elephants that still stand about human height at the shoulder. They are quadrupeds, walking on all fours, but have a split trunk that can be used for carrying and for fine work. They make good use of the provided utensils. So this is the player sharing with me a little bit of the background because I'm not familiar with this science fiction series, at least initially. So the response is, as the Tholian captain trails off on his tale of artifact discovery, the commander picks up where he left off. He shares the tale of the Old Kings, a highly sophisticated and advanced species that enslaved the Klingons and used them as labor and warriors in their galactic conflicts for thousands of years. He describes the genetic manipulation that led to the aesthetic differences in the Klingons on the station, the smooth versus bumpy foreheads. He recounts the rise of Kahless and the overthrow of oppression. The commander takes particular note to emphasize the discovery and reverse engineering of old King technology that has led to the current state of the Klingon Empire. Artifacts and technologies are continually discovered, though not all lead to the betterment of the Empire. He shares the tragedy of the recent biological incident, that was the pandemic video, that led to the near eradication of the planet Kangor. Perhaps, Captain, we might see an exchange of navigational data. This may certainly aid in historical and anthropological study of the space in our shared dominions. Our historians believe the Old Kings may have seeded other planets or enslaved other species. We would see those species liberated and any remnants of the Old Kings eliminated. Leaning closer towards his guest, the commander lowers his voice ominously. Before their fall, the Old Kings had been losing a vast conflict with an unknown enemy. We have no idea on who or what this enemy was. They may still be out there. It would be useful to have allies to rely on should they reappear. Smiling as he leans back in his chair, the commander raises his chalice. Well met, my friends. I hope we may learn from each other. And then out of character, I ask to the other player, are you up for sharing nav data? So when I say that, that means just in this early stage of the game, the nav data is just sharing maps. Basically, they've explored a certain amount of space, non-grayed out hexes. I've done the same thing, and we did that with the Federation. We exchanged navigational data, which basically means we're sharing maps. Now, in the early part of the game, the sharing of maps is kind of, it can be a valuable piece to know or not know, because once you share maps, and this comes when you have supply to each other, meaning that, for example, the Klingon Empire has supply 3. Most players have supply 3 at this point. And so if I have a base that is within 3 hexes of one of their bases or supply points, planet or base at this point of the game, So a base and a base, and they're in supply of each other, then they exchange, they're within supply of each other, and there's basically trade between them. And the argument is that merchants would be sharing navigational maps to each other so that they can further their exchange of trade. And therefore, as soon as that happens, the map opens up. So what we're doing here is we're just preemptively getting ahead of that to be able to share our maps early, to be able to know where everybody is and sort of figure that piece out. So, in response to my proposal, the other player says, while our tales suggest that conflagration, thank you, was more of an internecine, my goodness, that's a complicated word, internecine nature, it would seem to be worrying if something was still out there. We have good reason to believe our technology is not yet comparable with what came before, and hope that numbers will do what we do not have technology, while we do not have technology on our side. If the old enemy returns, we will fight it as best as we are able. Allies in such a fight would be a grand thing, but beyond my purview to negotiate, so he's not quite ready to do that. Our technology is not up to projecting power through a wormhole yet. So key thing there, he's telling me, and I can already assume this, that he doesn't have the ability to send supplies through the wormhole. As to navigational data, that's also a bit above my pay grade. But I can say that we are far to the east of where we started, some 20 sectors or so. I'll see if I can get a message through to the ship seed to see if the chief archaeologist what the chief archaeologist recommends. What would you do with such data if you had it? So then he sends to me in out of character. Generally, yes, as in he's open to exchange nav data, but there is some delicacy to it. We are not all that far apart, though hardly as close as the last time I ran the Tholians. He's making reference to another game we had where we were very close to each other. I am sure we can come to an agreement. Are you looking to open our mutual maps to each other, or just share a chunk around the wormhole that would allow for trade and such? Assuming it lasts long enough that we can get wormhole tech to the point where trade routes are viable. And when trade routes are viable, that means our maps will open up to each other. So my response to him, sort of like to speed things along. Out of character, initially an effort to open up the maps. More transparency equals more trust. Considering the location of the wormhole, I have some security concerns. That's on our side. Seeing the whole picture on both sides will make discussions a lot on it easier. I can offer up-to-date intel on the location of the feds for comparison as added value for the exchange. So this particular player and I have had multiple encounters. In fact, in the very first game, I jumped him early. And he did not appreciate that. Basically, I did a tech rush, and when I encountered him, I hammered him hard. In that particular game, the initial encounter with him and me was very frustrating for him. However, in that first game, he had the last laugh because he was the one who ended up taking me out. Totally based on a, again, first time I was playing the game, I trusted him. We had gotten to the point where we had established a trust. We had established a treaty, an agreement. And I was trying to work with him to be able to work against sort of a common foe, another player. And in the moment when I kind of pointed out to him the map, because this particular player from time to time can get a little bit of tunnel vision. And so I knew that, and I wanted to give him the bigger picture of what was going on. So I kind of laid it out for him. And one of the things that I had not considered is that when he looked at the map and he saw sort of how strong all the players were, he realized, as I did, too late, that I was out of position and would be really, really, really screwed if he decided to hit me. And it would be cheap, relatively speaking, for him to do that. Like, he would not lose a lot of ships to attack me and then take me out. So he did. He totally wiped the floor with me. In fact, he just decimated me out of the game, and as a result, grew, like economically grew substantially, and just became basically he and the other player I was trying to coordinate with to attack those two won the game. They just wiped the floor with me and the other players. It was disappointing, but it was my first time playing, so it was good to know. The second time around, or the last time he played the Tholians, we had a very frustrating initial encounter, and we were really aggressive. Well, I was always aggressive with him as far as like trying to draw a line in the sand, but we had a lot of disagreements about where that border was going to be. So we bring that baggage to this game, and so knowing that, and knowing that when I fight this particular player, it can be frustrating and challenging, I'm going to try and avoid that if I can, especially early on. So, again, sharing maps early will allow for better transparency and hopefully build up trust with this player for this game, and allow him to maybe, for us to work together, and I'll explain why that's more important as I kind of go on here. So, the last of my message says, Captain, once we have completed repairs to your ship, we can escort you through the wormhole and hopefully begin a robust exchange of cultural heritage, economic trade, and the beginning of productive collaboration on security. Meaning like we'll work together. He responds out of character, hopefully not too close to the homeworld this time. On my side, 4 hexes from the homeworld. So he says that, and I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. Because if you look at our map, again, if we look at our map here, you will see that here. Let me pull up the other map. So when you look at the map here, you can see that it's 3 hexes from my homeworld, and his homeworld's here, and it's 4 hexes. So we're basically, essentially, the same distance from each other's homeworld, almost, and that sucks. It really puts us in a situation where we're going to bump into each other unless we come to some kind of agreement. So let me get back to the role play back and forth. So he says, an escort through the wormhole would be appreciated, although I doubt there's much that we can do for each other in transit. If your vessel is damaged underway, we have a major facility near the wormhole terminus that can handle repairs. So he's telling me he's got a base on the other side. So then we asked the game master, do we need to do anything other than declare that the navcoms open up and connect the maps? And will that impact bulk turns notably? So at this early stage of the game, we're doing turns in like fits and starts. So we're doing like 5 or 10 turns at a time. And so the concern is that going to negatively impact our turns if we're going to start having to wait on each other, like basically going one turn at a time. And we don't want to do that because we want to kind of advance the game as quickly as possible. So he says, players can opt to open maps to each other, which, as you can imagine, is irreversible. I have done this for myself in the past when I'm the last one. This is a telling note. I'll share that in a second. So when he's the last player, the GM is saying that he'll share his map with everybody else because he, just doesn't want to hold things up. It also makes it easier for him to process and manage the map as a whole because he's literally manually managing all the map and distribution on his end as the GM. So, less map is less work. Best if everyone is on the all 22, meaning the map where everybody's on. Everybody's fully visible. So, Dave, just to confirm you're happy, or sorry, Dave's the name of the other player. Just to confirm you are happy to share nav data. Derek, if he's happy to do so, there are no issues, correct? And so he says, good to see you again. This is Dave, the other player. Good to see you again, Commander Turok, says Captain Toronto. My government has agreed to share navigational data. You'll find our exploration notes and marker buoy locations on this data crystal. He hands it over. Hopefully, it's in a compatible format. And so, out of character, he says, yes, share nav data. So, boom. And there we go. So, with that said, let's go back to the map. So here you can see in this map, let's So when I pull this up, you're going to see the Federation as well, and that's a kind of a good thing to think about. So let's look here. So you can see that the Federation in turn 61 has 42 ships. Has out of those 42 ships, 107 attack factor, 192 defense factor, which translates to 192 fleet cap. The Klingons only have 34, which is notable, the difference. 75 attack, 134 defense, so that's a significant deficit. And the Tholians have 59 ships. Almost double the number of ships I have. However, what's interesting to note there is that their attack factors are the same as my 34. So plug that away. But their defense factors obviously are higher. They've got 205, and that's their fleet cap. So what's interesting to note about that is that Tholian ships suck on attack but are really good defense. So basically when you fight them, it's really hard. It takes a long time to grind them down, but they don't hurt you as bad as maybe some other factions. So let's take a quick look at the economy. So the Federation in turn 61 has 47.5. Again, this is 475 divided by 10, so 47.5. 47.5 income. The Klingons have 43.5, so a difference of 4. Don't worry about the Praevians here. I'll share that in a second. And the Tholians have 385, so 38.5. So there's a noticeable difference between these three factions, and sort of the Klingons are the middle of the road. Interesting to note. So as we zoom out on this map, let's just take a quick look here. You can see that he's a little bit closer to the edge. He's fully explored that edge of the map and now is kind of like peeling open. Here, I should say this. He's peeling open like this. And so he's exploring a part of the map at the top there where him and I could very much quickly come to a middle point. And then, of course, he's got everything on the left or the west of him and south. So interesting, because when you look at the big hexagon, there's lots of room there, right? So interesting to note. But let's take a second and go down to that little spot in the middle that you're talking about. So this is the Praevians. So Bottle, or Botel, was coming out of Federation space, as you can see here, and was moving on a diagonal, and then they encountered a convoy. So what's interesting about this is that my ship has a 2 attack and can decimate that convoy. I can just pop it in a second. But if I do that, I'm effectively starting a war. Now, I've played the Praevians in the past, and the Praevians are effectively bird-like Gorns. So if you're familiar with Star Trek, the Gorn are a lizard, sort of dinosaur-like people. And the Praevians are like the feathered version of them. So basically feathered dinosaurs in space. Now, from a cultural and sort of structure of how their tech is designed and like the different features of their ship, think of them like, and they're being played in this game, sort of like the Mongol horde. They are, they prefer roaming and raiding as opposed to sort of like the traditional build strong fortifications and hold the fortification. So they prefer roaming and raiding, fast moving, pillaging, that kind of thing. So that's, in this game, that's typically how they're going to be played. Think of them like Space Vikings or Space Mongols or something along those lines. And in fact, when it comes to the Mongol piece, that is exactly how the player is choosing to play them. So in the initial encounter between myself and the, sorry, I'm just looking it up here. The initial encounter between myself and the other player, we had an exchange when it came to the convoy that I encountered, and that led to that little trail of, oh, of course you can see now all my stuff there. So you can see, obviously you saw on the screen there, Mike's his name. He's the guy playing this character. Let's see here. So we have quite an exchange of information. So we have the initial point of contact, and then the initial point of contact leads to the discovery of the exchange of nav data, which allows this sort of little stretch of space that leads up to the space station. And you can see that the space station is also the two important things. One, it's sitting on a colony, which colonies grow into planets. And two, it's sitting on a gravity well. So be curious to know if he's gone through it. Has he gone through the gravity well? Has he not? I wonder the question. I wonder about that. But looking at this map, this is the response that he sent me in the exchange. So the Botel shows up to the base station and docks, and here's the beginning of the exchange, titled "An Invitation to the Horde." Very ominous. As the IKV Botel resonates with the securing of the docking clamps, Captain Tarlek stands in the airlock waiting for the environmental and decontamination sequence to complete. On the approach to the station, the captain had forwarded his request to meet with the base commander and begin the first steps of opening diplomatic relations with the Paravian Horde. As a first step, Captain Tarlek shared the history of the Old Kings, their subjugation of the Klingon species, and the Klingons' overthrow of them. So I'm just... Basically, we have the video talking about the Old Kings. That if you haven't seen it, I recommend going to the channel and checking out basically the first video on the channel, and you'll see that is the history of the Old Kings. So just sharing that information quick and dirty, and then the communication is: our mission is inspired by the sacrifice of Kales and his trek to the stars in search of other species or Klingon colonies yet to be liberated. What is the history of the Paravian Horde and the story of your species? So, Mike responds. The data file that Captain Tarlek received on both the history and basic governmental form of the Horde and biology was interesting to say the least. The Horde was only a recent arrival to spaceflight and warp power, having appropriated it from an encounter with colonists on their primary world, Paravia. Apparently, these colonists abused the Paravians' willingness to share their world and began polluting and destroying or claiming large portions of hunting grounds for various flocks who had, by this point, collectively progressed to a development somewhere close to the beginnings of the Industrial Age. So basically what we're talking about is something akin to colonization, so our colonial mindset. You have humans coming in and treating the Paravians like European powers treated Native Americans or indigenous people here in North America. And that's essentially what he's describing here, something very similar. So the pressures forced the Paravians to consolidate from loose flocks into clans, with a single I clan. I'm assuming it's I clan. It's two I's and a clan. So two clan, maybe a single two clan. To coordinate, I'll have to ask Mike what that is. To coordinate their efforts. They reached a tipping point about 150 to 175 years after the colonists' arrival, when the Paravians rose up en masse and slaughtered every one of the colonists' descendants who were treating the Paravians as a labor force and domestic servants. I've lost my place. Stand by. No human was left alive. Thanks in part to the embedding of Paravians into the workforce of human society, it only took 50 years or so to understand and replicate much of the pre-warp technologies that the humans left behind. The Paravians today still maintain the outlook and mindset of roaming flocks and the clan structure. So again, going back to that sort of Mongolian raider horde kind of mentality. Excuse me. The physiology of the Paravian species is carbon-based, with 6 base pairs of DNA. The species is a 4-limbed bipedal with an average height of 2.5 meters to the top of their feathered crest, mass on average of 120 kilos, with females being slightly larger and heavier than males. It appears that the feathers are not adapted to flight, but instead serve to provide insulation by trapping a layer of air between them and their body. Their forelimbs are connected to the body via membranes that extend down the ends of their forelimbs and torsos into the pelvic crest, allowing for gliding and powered flight in low 0.4 g gravity of Paravia. So low gravity in Paravia, and they can fly. Their forelimbs terminate with a four-fingered hand with two disposable digits in a pamprodactyl configuration and display an amazing degree of dexterity. Their legs have small membranes that extend from the lower pelvis to the knees, so think of like a bat in many respects, which serves to stabilize flight. The feet are in a four-toed syndactyl configuration. Neither the arm or leg flaps hinder movement, but they are long enough to grant the arms and legs full range of motion. The gravity in the airlock lessens to match the lower gravity of Ironhold Station before the massive doors open, where Captain Tarlak sees the station commander flanked by two guards. When they see him, their toothed beaks open in surprise, and they lower their weapons but hold their fire. So what's interesting, when they say lower their weapons, when I first read that, I thought they had weapons up and they lowered them. But rather, I think they brought their weapons to bear on me and held their fire. I think that's what he meant to say. And the response is, you said you were Klingon. You look human. So obviously with the history he provides, they don't trust humans. And this Klingon who shows up is a spacefaring Klingon, which, as per the history of the old kings, is more smooth-headed than bumpy-headed. So I look very human, after all. When you look to TOS, it's basically humans in makeup. Those are the Klingons, right? If you can hear that motorbike, it's pretty loud. Okay, so here's the fun part. So this could very easily have turned into a fight, or at least it could have ended up that way. As I'm just sitting here, let me take a moment and take a quick look at... Oh, never mind. Okay. So back to the exchange. A smirk. Here, let me just change so that you're not continuing to stare at a map that really doesn't make any sense to you. So here we go. So the captain, a smirk crosses Captain Tarlak's face as he pulls his communicator from his utility belt. Major Barrack, would you do me the honor of joining me in the airlock? Returning the communicator to his utility belt, the captain steps forward through the airlock. Commander, it is an honor to meet you. To address your surprise at my appearance, Klingons are dominated by two genetic lines, both genetically manipulated by the old kings. Those who share my more human-like appearance were tailored to serve the starships of the old kings. Turning to face the heavy footfalls of a bulky, strongly ridged forehead Klingon Marine Major, whereas my head of security is a prime example of the line of Klingons engineered for physical labor and planetary combat. So I'm using this as an example to illustrate the two different genetic lines, hopefully diffusing the situation. I can assure you the blood of a Klingon warrior flows equally through both our veins, and Major Barrack is my brother in arms as I am his. The Major says, "Everything okay here, Captain?" while remaining on the boat-tail side of the airlock. Turning to the Paravian commander, "I think we'll be fine, Major. Do you feel the need for the Major to join us, or shall we continue our negotiations?" So, kind of calling his bluff a little bit here, and using the dynamic to illustrate the point that, yes, these Klingons sort of look like humans, but not humans. The commander motions to his guards as they return their weapons to rest, although they could quickly raise them again if needed. And incidentally, I'm not putting in the extra S here, but he's putting in extra S's like Gorns do when they, slither through their words, almost like a lisp. So he's writing that in here, and I'm not actually saying it, but I'll try and say it. Try and translate it here. We shall take your word at present, although we reserve the right to scan your person to compare with known human DNA. Your head of security may join us if you wish. What can the clans do for you and your people? I respond, we are on a mission of exploration. We seek the exchange of information and the development of mutually beneficial agreements. With those we have encountered to date, the sharing of navigational data has been of greatest value. However, noting the existence of the gravitational anomaly in close proximity to the base, we can also transit it or any other wormhole type objects and provide telemetry on its terminus. So travel through and tell you about it on the other side. How can the Klingon Empire help the Paravian Horde? The response is, that is good. We seek to learn about our place in the galaxy and increase our holdings. You are the first sapient species we have encountered. Let me know if this is getting too much. How far is your space? We would not wish to intrude. If you are willing to share your charts and continue to update them, we shall do the same. Our people have been studying the rift endlessly and for many years now. I'm going to stop that. We have achieved the ability to send probes through without destruction, though we have yet to send a vessel through, as it is a one-way trip. Should you wish to enter it and do not yet have the calculations, and do not yet have the calculations to enable it to be done safely, we are willing to provide you with the trajectory calculations that would improve your chances of passing through the gravity rift unharmed. We caution you that this must be tailored to your people's specific warp geometries. Out of character, he says, it was a pain to type this before I learned how to shut off the autocorrect. I kept stripping my extra S's from words. So I respond, in that case, I've been authorized to share navigational data, which will include the intelligence of 2 other species we have encountered. Beyond the gravitational anomaly here, beyond the gravitational anomaly here, are there any other such rifts or wormholes within reach of the Horde? And then I tell the game master, happy to exchange information. Sadly, no. This is the only example that we have discovered of that phenomenon. Will you be taking the plunge? Once we have completed our initial contact and negotiations, our intention will be to transit it. Should you be interested in what we find on the other, or would you be interested in what we find on the other side? We would be very interested in that data. Only our curiosity has been piqued. Shall we set up a supply line for your ship? We doubt that we would be able to send those supplies through the rift, though, meaning that he doesn't have supply through wormholes. But also with gravity wells being there that they're one way, we can't provide supply through gravity rifts one way. You can do it through wormholes because it's two-way, but you can't do it through one way because any supply ships that would go through are stranded on the other side. A resupply of perishable goods and a top-up of our consumables would certainly be appreciated. Yes, set up supply for the ship. We will transmit our telemetry once we've transited the wormhole. After a series of logistical and administrative details are finalized, Captain Tarlek moves to excuse himself. Commander, it has been an honor and a pleasure to meet with you, and I look forward to hearing of the continued and growing collaboration between our species. I will make plans to leave for the anomaly as soon as Botel has been supplied. Derek, summary of events. Derek is the game master. Exchange of nav data between the Paravians and the Klingons, and Botel will move through the gravity well as soon as it's resupplied. So that should be like as soon as possible. And then Mike, who's the other player, agrees. So he exchanges that data. So here we are coming up onto an hour, and I've provided you the back and forth that's gone on between myself and the other players. Now, what I'll do is I will reveal the map to you now, and let's have a quick conversation about what's going on. Here we go. Boom. Whew. All right. So you can see here on this map that just initially when I shared with you, I believe it was either last or the previous live stream that we had lost a player. Can you tell where that player was? So there's a somewhat equidistant distribution of players on the map in an effort to try and make things equal. And you can see here, obviously, there's a certain pattern. And that one player that we lost was between the red and the black team, the black and yellow team, I should say. So you can see then the top is the red. So that's Dave the Tholians. That's him at the top of the map there. Then you've got the black, which is right there, and that's us, the Klingons. In the middle of the map, you've got Mike, which is the Paravians. So we've got the Tholian elephants, the Paravian horde, Andre, who plays the Federation, so classic Kirk Federation, and then the Game Master, Derek, plays that other faction over in that corner there. So what's interesting is in the coming week, I will create some videos that will explain these different factions. So explain the Paravians, explain the Federation, not that you'll need much of that, the Tholians certainly, and this other faction that the Game Master is playing. So the Game Master is playing a faction of basically humans that are modeled after BattleTech. So for those of a generation who grew up sort of in the 80s, you might remember Macross or Robotech. And if you're an anime fan, you probably know that there are many, including Gundam and countless other animes, that feature piloted robot suits that battle mechs and things like this that that have been cartoons and animes and things like that. And so lots of different iterations of this. BattleTech's effectively one of those. BattleTech is a game that was designed sort of in North America. The art for those mechs is, there's a crossover between Macross and BattleTech because there was a licensing issue around the designs for those mechs. And so currently, you can still find BattleTech the game in various formats. There is a tabletop war game that you can still find. There is a turn-based strategy game that you can find produced by Harebrained Schemes. If you go on Steam, for example, you can find it. And it's a great game. I enjoy it. It's a it's a replication of the tabletop game, but a computer game turn-based. There is Mech Warrior, which is BattleTech, but in a sort of a real-time simulator kind of environment where you are piloting a specific mech. And those are probably the games that I'm familiar with that you can be able to find today. And so there's a similar mythology and story behind BattleTech, where basically they have these different clans or houses, factions that vie for control and resources and so on. And so in this game, he's introduced the faction of one of the BattleTech factions, and he's playing them as a faction in the game. What's interesting about this is that we're still using it in the context of Star Trek, in the sense of the ships and the systems in place for battle or for conflict resolution between ships and fleets and things like that. There's no mechanism that we have in the game that translates into mech battles that may happen on the ground. However, what's interesting about this piece is that it's introduced a new potential thing that we can do in future games, which is introduce other factions or other non-Star Trek factions. So this is a Star Trek game, without a doubt. All the factions that are bred into the game and the rules and so on are Star Trek. But we've homebrewed this so much. We've homebrewed it to the point where we can introduce... Let me switch over here. That we've introduced so many other factions that we could include, for example, Star Wars factions, like whether it's the Empire or the Rebels or the Old School Senate, the Galactic Republic. We can include factions in that way with ships and that style. We could design counters around those ship types, like, for example, Imperial Star Destroyers that may be more focused on fighters than actual combat strength. You've probably seen many videos on YouTube that pit like Star Trek ships versus Star Wars ships and things like that. Size differences and things and all this kind of stuff. So we can factor those kind of pieces in, and we can invent that, but we haven't done that yet. That's not going to manifest in this game, but it's something that we've talked about in the future. Problem is that to design that, to create those counters, to kind of go down that homebrew path, it's going to take a lot of time and energy. And so, again, this is a game that we play on the side. And if that's something you'd like us to do, then please let us know. And if you are really interested in that and you enjoy this series, then I would ask that you please consider, if you want that to happen, let us know in the comments and give us some positive feedback that that's something you'd like us to see, including more factions above and beyond just Star Trek. Do we want to make this a pan sci-fi kind of game where we can include Stargate, Star Wars, Star Trek, all these other kind of, Babylon 5, stuff like that? We can include factions in that regard. That'd be kind of cool. But in the context of this game, we've got basically the classic Star Trek races that we're playing, and the different interpretations. So I'm going to go back to the map for one last second before we sign off, and I want to show you two things that have happened on the map. So I'll go back to the big picture map, and you can see here that there is this yellow line that's sort of in the hexes, right? In the hexes. So you can see one that's sort of north to south that runs to the Paravian Horde, and the one that's east-west that kind of is just above the Federation. So let's go to the Federation one first. So let me show you the screen capture here. So here you can see, for example, we've got the Paravian Horde and we've got the Federation. Now that wormhole that we have, so as a reminder, Homeworld is in this Papa 14, and one hex over is a wormhole that leads down here. So big security concern there, right? But the Feds are really close. So in an effort to try and make sure that we're not going to end up fighting with the Feds this early on, I negotiated, and it wasn't necessarily a role play because it just didn't work out that way. Andre is a big Habs fan, the Montreal Canadiens, and if you're a hockey fan, then you know that the Habs at this point today, Saturday, now 3:30 my local time, are down 3-0 in the series, and it's not looking good. But he's a big Habs fan. And so in an effort to try and make it sort of short and sweet and our little back and forth quick, we just jumped on the phone real quick and sorted out this borderline. And the idea here is that, of course, I've got the base and the wormhole right there. And so 2 hexes away from it is the sort of the hope or the desire. His closest base is the one here in X-ray, like XX31. So it's 2 hexes away from this common border. So draw a straight line across. We'll do a little bit of a diagonal line here just to make it based on the space that he's explored to date, as opposed to running a straight line across here and causing issues. So a little bit of a diagonal line and then straight across. So we've created this border here as a sort of a way to sort of prevent him from going any further north. He's got lots of room to the west and to the south, and probably wants to kind of close the distance with the Game Master over here, this faction. What is the name of this faction? I'm going to have to figure that out. Borak, that's what they are. Yeah, so under the tabs here, they're referred to as the Borak. And they are an early race in the mythology of the Starfleet universe. So they kind of predate the Federation and all that. So he's got the Borak over here, or the Battletech guys, and the Federation. So there's a lot of distance here. So if he can redistribute or move his guys closer to exploring that space or closing the distance between him and the Paravians, that would be good. And then, of course, up here, we had a little bit of a problem. So when we send our turns back and forth, especially in the bulk orders, we set up what are called contingency orders, or we write out sort of a little narrative that describes the if this, then that sort of description. And I described a mission that I called Operation Doorstop, which was to try and make sure that nothing came through that wormhole. And there was a little bit of a misunderstanding because I wanted to see that if, for example, that wormhole that the Tholians have, if it was really far away from his homeworld and there was nothing around it, then I would have really wanted to send a fleet through there to kind of make sure that I have as much distance between my homeworld and his as possible. But when I got that map and I saw that his is 4 hexes away and mine's 3 hexes away, that didn't make any sense. However, the way the Game Master interpreted, let me come back here. the way the game master had interpreted my contingency orders, the I sent the fleet through. So I sent a fleet through the wormhole and landed on his doorstep, and he was not happy. Based on our past experience with each other, it would be very in character or sort of like on brand for me to full on attack him this early on. It would have been straight up full on brand for me, but I didn't want to do that. So when I had initially proposed this border, which was along the Echo row, straight up and down, he was initially okay with that because it is equidistant between the edge of space I've explored and the edge of space he's explored. You can see here there's three hexes in this middle of the line. When I went through, that kind of stirred the pot a bit, so we made a little compromise, and I offered this compromise, this little stepped border, to give him a little bit more room on his end, and that's fine. So if we go back to the big map, which you can see here, on this side, you can see that what we've done is effectively we've cordoned off approximately a quarter of the space, and we've established a border between the Feds and us and the Tholians. And that is sort of preemptively done to try and sort out and make sure that we're not competing to try and expand as far as we can up to the border. Now, granted, it's probably a really good idea to explore up to that border as soon as possible, build bases and fortify that border as soon as reasonably possible. But as opposed to making it sort of a big conflict, we don't really want to do that, because the more we're going to, granted, this is a war game, but the more we want to start a fight early, the worse it's going to put us in a bad position in the long run. And then lastly, on this map that you'll see here, there's this, I'll take away the ship so you can see it. There is a minor planet that popped up there. So this is one of the things that can happen in exploration. You can encounter a minor world or a minor race. So I've encountered this minor race. What's interesting about that is that there's three ways to do this. One, ignore them. Two, send a diplomat over there. So let me bring the ships back. So I could send, you can see here I've got a D4N. That is a Klingon special ship. We referred to that in the penal colony, or the penal ship episode. And the D4N is a diplomatic ship. And it has basically the ability to go over there and engage in like a mission, a special ability that it has to be able to improve the attitude of the other race. So we could improve the attitude of the other race, and then eventually they just join our empire. The third option is to conquer them. So militarily blow them out of the water. And what that means is that for 10 turns or 5 years in the game, they will be devastated and produce 1 economic point, versus the minor world that they are, they would produce 3. And so there's 10 turns it's devastated, then it recovers for 4, and then so actually 7 years. It takes 7 years for it to recover. And that's terrible. However, at this early stage in the game, there's lots of time for it to recover without it being too much of an issue. And I want to show you this, Fleet Cap. So now that we have all the different factions in play, let's go down the list. So the ones that are closest, let's go to the Tholians. So this is now turn 66. In turn 66, the Tholians have 65 ships. That's a lot. Still only 82 attack, but 229 in defense. The Paravians have 42 ships, same as the Feds. They've got a 91 attack, 172. So the Feds have 42 with a 107 and a 192. So they're a little bit, they have a few more big hitter ships, or like bigger ships. Orions are just pirates. The Lyrans, interesting. Where are the Lyrans? The Lyrans must be a minor race that... There we go. So the Lyrans are a minor race that the Borak, or the Game Master, has encountered. So they've got 7 attack, 12 defense based on their ships. The Klingons, we currently have 35 ships with an 80 attack, 150 defense. And the Borak have 28 ships with 47, 119. So what I've done in this scenario is I've chosen... So there's 3 economic states that we can be at. We can be at peace, we can be at limited war, or we can be at war. Limited war doesn't actually build up war turns. It allows you to recover from war turns at 1/3 a turn, 1/3 the time, as opposed to... Let me try this again. So every war turn adds to a total of up to 20 that you can have before you start encountering economic consequences. And when you're at war, you get 100% of your income. Once you want to knock down those war turns, if it took you 5 turns, you get 5 war turns. When you are recovering, it will take you 10 turns, twice the amount of time that you were at war, to recover those turns. Clear? When you're at limited war, it's 1/3. So instead of 50% recovery, you have a 33% recovery. So basically, for every 3 turns, instead of every 2 turns, it takes you to recover 1 war turn. Make sense? So 5 turns will take you 10 turns to recover, or 15 turns to recover. 10 turns at peace, 15 at limited war. However, when it comes to limited war, you can only be at limited war for 4 turns before you have to go to war, or back to peace. Now, when you're dealing with a minor race, because of an issue that came up in gaming the system with another player, when you're dealing with a minor race, you can only ever go to limited war. And you can only go to limited war on the turn that you engage or attack them. So what I've done here is I've basically given intention to build up or move the home fleet to attack, and then on the turns that they attack, overbuild ships, or like build as many ships as I can, to be able to max out the number of ships that we've got. Because at this point, one of the big things that I took away from the map opening up and seeing everybody is that the number of ships that we have, the Klingons, is significantly less than everybody else. Not too much of a big worry right now, because the only 2 factions that could touch us at the moment are the Feds and the Tholians. The Tholians don't have a lot of... first of all, they'd have to go through the wormhole, and they don't have the technology to come through at any time really soon. And they don't have a strong attack factor, just strong defense. So to deal with that, I've done 2 things. 1, we're going to build more ships, and 2, we put a space dock on that wormhole. So we have a dock in the hex of the wormhole, and we're going to keep a fleet on that wormhole to make sure that nothing surprises us and comes through. The second thing is the Feds. Now, the Feds are... there's 2 things about the Feds. 1, they've got more ships than we do, but it's not clear that they have any wormhole tech at all, so they won't be able to transit the wormhole and provide us a really significant threat, as long as we're able to secure the wormhole on their end. The second piece is that they are close enough to the Paravians, the Berg guys, that it's most likely that they're going to focus, or that there should be some kind of focus between those 2 before they focus on us. Also, we're working really well with the Feds at this point, so there's a good relationship there, and we should try and, manage that as best we can to try and encourage cooperation and collaboration rather than, confrontation. So that's where we're at there. And that's pretty much the recap. So an hour and 20 minutes in, we've talked about we've talked about the encounter with the Tholians and the fact that they're basically an elephant-style species. We've talked about the encounter with the Paravians, which are the bird people, and we've negotiated with them. We're going to send Botel through the gravity well, and once we get through the gravity well, we'll see what's on the other end. We've established a border between the Tholians and the Federation, and there's currently discussion right now on establishing some kind of border with the Paravians, but I will wait until that comes out on the map to be able to show you. And then, as I mentioned before, there was I made reference to the fact that the Game Master said that you can share the maps, and then when he's the last one left, if he's the last one left, he will share his map just to make it easier for him to process turns. And when you look at the map right now, you will see we've got all the players on the map. So right now we've got 5 players. That's how many players we have in the game. And the Game Master is the one in the bottom left corner there of the hexagon. And because the Klingons have encountered the Federation and the Tholians and the Paravians, and we shared all those maps, now we're all seeing each other. And so this makes it processing a little bit easier for the Game Master to be able to process all those turns. So there we go. So that's good. The biggest thing now will be how we're going to progress turns in bunches, whether we're going to go 5 at a time, 10 at a time, whatever. Right now we're currently going 5 at a time. I can tell you that I'm waiting on the response or the feedback up to turn 70. So this was turn 66, or like up to turn 66. And I'm waiting on turn 70 to come back. So when turn 70 comes back, I'll be able to report to you where we're at as far as the size of our fleet, what we did with regards to that minor world, how we're growing and expanding, and where things are going, how the borders have been sort of set up, and what is next. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Again, if you've stayed with us this long, thank you so much for staying with the live stream. Hopefully this has been entertaining for you, educational, and fun. If you are interested in getting involved in this series, in this game, then please add your comments in the comments below, either on Twitch or on YouTube. And if you are so inclined, then please head on over to patreon.com/LostStars and consider maybe supporting us there and getting involved in the community. If you join us on Patreon, you can join us on the Discord channel, and you will join in on the Klingon tactical sessions where we will discuss and collaborate on what we're going to do next. How do we want to attack? How do we want to expand? How do we want to manage these resources we have, and what do we want to build? One little thing that I'll share before we go. In the last live stream, we talked about the Dreadnought Project. I am pleased to report we have 2 Dreadnoughts and more on the way. But that is something for the next live stream. So if you haven't already, please head over to patreon.com/LostStars and just take a look and see how you can best support us for as little as $5 Canadian a day, which is, if you're in the United States, it's $3 and change. Basically the price of a coffee, depending on where you buy your coffee, at least $1, a little bit more than $1 a week. You can help support us here at Star Trek Lost Stars and show your support just in the sense that you're enjoying this game. Otherwise, please feel free to add your comments below. Tell me what you want to see, how you want us to progress, what kind of videos do you want to see, and how you want this game to go forward. Hit that thumbs up button, and if you feel so inclined, please subscribe to us over on the YouTube channel, Star Trek Lost Stars, and or follow us on Twitch. Either one, whatever way that you prefer to receive your video and live stream content, that's where we will meet you. So with that said, my throat is parched, the coffee is cold. I'm going to take a sip. Coffee's still cold. My throat is parched, the coffee's cold, and it is time for us to roll out. We'll be coming to you this week as a unique week. I'll be doing live streams almost every day. Not tomorrow. Today is Saturday, so not on Sunday, but I'll be coming to you live on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to be giving you quick updates on videos and how the turns are progressing. You let me know what that schedule is like for you. I will let you know in posts on Twitch and on YouTube of when these videos are coming up, and you'll be able to follow us along on those live streams. But until then, Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Tony Morrow, and I will see you in the next live stream.